We have to understand that these are Arab militias. The Arabs in Yemen, in the Houthis, the Arabs in southern Lebanon, Hezbollah, the Arabs in Iraq and Syria. They are all anti-Israeli. Why are they attacking us? Because we are unconditionally supporting the destruction of the Arab population in Gaza. If that were to halt, or at least we were to do what I just stated earlier, essentially say we're not going to be a party to this, the attacks on us would end. There is no desire on the part of Iran or anyone else in the region to go to war with us. We, however, have been desperately seeking this opportunity, looking for an excuse. Is this enough? I don't know. You have to look at American opinion polls. And remember, we always have, about a third of the electorate that cheers regardless of whom we bomb. I mean, if we bombed Panama tomorrow morning, a third of the electorate would stand up and say, oh, it's wonderful. It's great.
Right.
Americans have no fear of war because it always happens on someone else's soil. And that is about to change if we attack Iran.
Senator Graham has said we should bomb Tehran. No surprise that he would say it, as absurd as it is. But if we do anything like that, what will Iran do? Attack Israel?
I think we will pay a heavy price. Iran has an enormous arsenal of missiles. I urge everyone to go online. It's very easy to find out and look at this enormous arsenal. Thousands of very precise, very destructive theater ballistic missiles, as well as tactical ballistic missiles. They have cruise missile technology, infinite numbers of drones. Now, what was fired, I think, was a crude tactical ballistic missile by these Shiite Arabs. They've been given older technology and allowed to have that, but the Iranians have not provided them with their top-of-the-line equipment. If those are employed, not only are they in a position to attack with great precision all of our positions in the region. Remember, we have about 57,000 Americans in uniform in the region. Almost 30,000, or perhaps a little more, are in bases that are sitting. Yes, that's an excellent demonstration of what exists. Go to the right and work your way down. The ones to the right are what I would call blockbusters. These are missiles that would flatten cities, flatten military installations, destroy airfields, harbors. They're all conventional warheads, but the destructive power is enormous and it's precise. If the Iranians shoot at something, they hit it. They just demonstrated that a couple of weeks ago when they struck targets in Syria and Iraq. And listen, they could have done infinitely more damage. I think they were all in Syria, but they could have done much more damage. They chose not to. When you destroy a Mossad position with a Kurdish man and his family who are Mossad agents, and that is in close proximity to the United States Embassy, you demolish the house, kill everybody in it, but you do no damage to anything that is American or American personnel. That should tell everyone they have extraordinary technology that can be used against us all over the region. They have hypersonic missiles. Now, these are of Chinese manufacture, but they are of a Russian invention originally. And these hypersonic missiles are in a position to strike targets at sea. And there's no way to shoot them down or defend against them. You have a British aircraft carrier, an American aircraft carrier in the Red Sea or the Indian Ocean. They can be targeted because everyone now has access to overhead surveillance. Overhead surveillance with the kind of ability to read the names on gravestones that did not exist in those countries 20 years ago. So their targeting is very precise. And ships at sea, regardless of whether they're nuclear or conventionally powered, are slow. These are slow-moving targets. Anyone who thinks otherwise is crazy. And the point is that these hypersonic missiles can adjust. So if they fire these things, they will hit their targets. And you had mentioned Israel. If the Israelis are participating with us in direct strikes on Iran, then I think the arsenal will be launched in great quantities from numerous different locations, all of which we cannot be positively identified, and they will reduce most of Israel to ashes.
As we speak, literally as we speak, Republican and Democratic members of Congress are calling the White House and saying Attack, attack, attack. We have to look strong. What would you advise the president to do? Would you say take those 57,000 troops and bring them home immediately?
Oh, yes. In fact, that's what Donald Trump wanted to do in November of 2020. Of course, he had tried earlier. He failed because he didn't understand that simply giving an order meant nothing in Washington in the federal bureaucracy. You have to follow up. You have to hold the military officers and the diplomats accountable who systematically avoid executing your order. He wanted our forces out of Syria. He wanted them out of Iraq. And he had good reason for that because these little penny packets of forces are easy targets. Again, it's back to something we just don't say enough. We have been facing opponents without armies, air forces, air defenses. That is about to end. Iran, Turkey, certainly Hezbollah. These are real forces with real capability. We haven't had to face that. By the way, neither have the Israelis. And the Israelis would be the first to tell you privately that too many of their soldiers and officers have spent too much policing people on the West Bank and around Gaza. They're not accustomed to a full-up, all-out war. And that's what they're asking for. And they'll get it if they don't stop. And we are going to get it. And remember, Hezbollah has substantial facilities and concentrations of people in Mexico. So do Islamists who are Sunni Muslims in Mexico. We don't even know who has actually entered the United States. I mean, no one seemed to care when thousands of military-age men from China and other countries entered the United States. Nobody seems to have gotten very exercised until quite recently when they realized that Arabs and Iranians and others and Malays and other Muslims from different parts of the country had also entered. Suddenly people are beginning to realize it. Well, what about our nuclear power facilities? What about our power grid? What about the weapons that exist that are in the hands of the cartels? Now, the cartels want to continue to infect us and destroy us with drugs because that's where they make their money. But organized crime frequently cooperates for enough money with other entities, state and non-state actors who have an interest in harming us. We should not write off the very high probability that if this war goes forward, we will face a second front along the Mexican border and potentially a third front inside the United States.
Does Hezbollah in Mexico have the military equipment that Hezbollah in Lebanon has?
First of all, that's classified. I'm sure people that are operating in the intelligence communities can give you a better answer. All I can tell you is that certainly in terms of surveillance equipment, small arms, RPGs, and some shoulder-fired air defense missiles, they are extremely well equipped. So are the cartels. And they exchange data, they exchange information, they work together. This is not a new phenomenon. The IRA was working with Islamist terrorist organizations in North Africa. People were shocked. Well, of course, all of these various entities have agendas and they sometimes coincide.
What would you tell Joe Biden to do?
Other than make arrangements to go to the nearest rest home, I would certainly suggest that he stop harassing Texas and the other Republican state governors, that he stay away from the Texas National Guard, let the Texas National Guard do its job of protecting those states. And as far as New Mexico and California, that apparently regard themselves as not really part of the United States and therefore don't care what happens to their borders, we should consider putting federal troops there immediately.
I meant, what would you advise him to do with respect to Israel and the soldiers that were killed in Syria or Jordan, wherever it was?
Well, first of all, it would be very useful for us to privately, behind the scenes, talk to these various actors. But clearly, there is no mission for U.S. forces in the region on the ground in Iraq or Syria. They're effectively magnets for attack. They have been in that position now for quite a while. There's nothing for them to do. ISIS is not a big issue any longer. Between the Iranians and the Shiite militias they trained and the Russians, ISIS has been largely eliminated. I know everyone likes to beat their chest and argue that we did the bulk of the work we did not. It was done by Iranians and Russians. And we worked with them, by the way, even the Iranians that we now want to attack. People don't seem to get it and understand what's real and what isn't. But the bottom line is we should get them out. There's no reason for them to be there.
If Iran and Israel are in a war and we come to the aid of Israel, will Russia get involved on the side of Iran?
Well, Russia has made it very clear that it regards Iran as a strategic partner of great importance. There is an agreement that's on the table for signature by Moscow that would effectively permanently arrange things to ensure that Russia does come to Iran's aid. But I think that's a formality. Russia will not stand by and allow us to destroy Iran. They will provide Iran with whatever it needs to protect itself, and they will stand by Iran. By the way, the Chinese, who have critical interests in access to the Persian Gulf and access to East Africa, where they get great quantities of food, will not stand by and do nothing while we force Iran to submit or die, in which case Iran will fight and probably close the Suez. You can write off the Straits of Hormuz. You can write off the Suez along with the straits down between Africa and Yemen, which I think is called the Gate of Tears. Those things will all be closed. The Chinese have already taken actions to protect themselves by making it impossible for us to gain access to a number of upstream minerals that we regard as essential to our national security and the building of military equipment. They're concerned about what we're prepared to do. We need to back away from this. This will become regional and I would say semi-global very quickly. And the greatest danger is that the Israelis will respond with the use of a nuclear weapon, particularly as they watch their cities, Tel Aviv, Haifa, and so forth, largely annihilated by these arsenals of missiles. And if that were to happen, I think that would have catastrophic consequences for Israel and the world, far worse than anything we've seen thus far.
First, he said control from the river to the sea, which of course they don't have, but they're fighting to have. Then he said sovereignty from the river to the sea. Is there any question in your mind what he was talking about?
No, not at all. Remember, he and frankly most Israelis equate the final removal of all the Arabs that currently live in what they regard as Greater Israel. This is the sea to the Jordan River, as equating to their long-term security and survival. Remember, he said, for us, this is existential. Either all of these people have got to go and we control everything, or we're finished. He's making the argument that Israel will not survive unless it executes this operation. I think we have to take him seriously. I think the Israelis believe it. The question is not what the Israelis want or what they believe, but what do the American people want? And how do they feel? Are they comfortable with the wholesale removal of the Arab population, Muslim and Christian, from Gaza, its death or expulsion or its killing directly or indirectly through disease and starvation, or not? If they're not comfortable with that, they need to get off their rear ends and call their representatives in Washington, because no one in Washington is opposed. I shouldn't say no one. I'm sure there are a few people, but there are so few paying any attention to it. I think it's really irrelevant.
Well, Washington must know what was stated in the clips that we just ran. Washington must know that there is zero impetus for a two-state solution in the Netanyahu government, and as you indicated, among the Israeli population by an enormous percentage. So should we take seriously, or are they lying to us when Joe Biden and Tony Blinken say two-state solution, two-state solution?
No, I think they know that that's utterly unacceptable to the Israelis at this point. If there was a chance for that, it died some time ago. So it's an all or nothing proposition. Either all of the Arabs go or they don't. And in the minds of Israelis, if they're not removed, there's a permanent threat to their existence and they cannot tolerate that.
The internet the International Court of Justice, which did not
Mhm.
order a ceasefire, it has no ability to enforce its order, which did not find as a matter of fact and law that Israel is engaged in genocide, nevertheless told Israel not to engage in genocide and to report back to it in 30 days. The latter was by 16-1, which included the justice that was sent from Israel. As you know, South Africa got to add a justice to the court. It's very unique that they can do that. And Israel got to add a justice to the court. That vote was 16-1. The other vote was 15-2. Did the ICJ ruling burst the bubble of Israel moral rectitude, or had that bubble been burst by the IDF in Gaza?
Outside of the United States and Israel and the United Kingdom, probably Australia and New Zealand, I'd say it has burst. But as far as we're concerned, it's irrelevant. The International Court of Justice is irrelevant to us. We're not signatories. We don't respect it. We have no use for it. We don't care. And remember, the entire government on Capitol Hill is, with very few exceptions, is comfortable with what the Israelis are doing. That's my point. The only way to put a stop to this is for the American people to raise their voices and say, we don't want to be party to this operation. It is inconsistent with our views of what is morally right or wrong. But it hasn't happened.
No, there's somewhat of a movement in Michigan, which has probably the largest Palestinian or Arab population base of any state in the Union, but it doesn't seem to have motivated the president at all.
By the way, we should note that Americans, I think if they were asked, are equally opposed to the goals of Hamas and other like-minded organizations that want to rid the Middle East of Jews. We don't support that. We would not stand by and allow that to happen. I don't think we should stand by, do nothing, and allow this to happen. I would simply urge the president to stop lying to the American people, along with all of his colleagues, all of whom have benefited enormously from the money poured into their organizations from the lobby and Israel's agents in the United States, and simply say, if you're going to persist in this, you're going to have to do it alone. We're not going to underwrite it. We're not going to support it. I mean, I'm certainly not advocating that we should commit forces to stop it. I don't believe in that. I didn't support that in the past. I don't support it now. But we should simply say that's completely inconsistent with our views of what is morally right and wrong. And as the president, I'm telling you right now, if you persist, we will withdraw our support.